I'm Andrea Hill, and I'm your host for the MJSA webinar series. MJSA has made this episode available to the entire industry, not just to its membership, because we think it's such an important topic for everybody to understand. And so lowering the barriers, getting more people in the conversation, this is an important part of the work. My guests today are, and I'm going to go in the direct order that they're on my screen. I have no idea what order they're in on your screen, but we're going to go clockwise on mine. So our first guest is Mina Stones out of Nigeria. And Mina Stones is an ethical or responsible workshop that's producing a whole range of jewelry and lapidary. We've got Susan Wheeler, who is the founder of the Responsible Jewelry Transformative and the Chicago Responsible Jewelry Conference. We have Christina Vieja, who is with PACT, which is an NGO, and also one of the collaborators on the Moyo Gems project. And we have Monica Stevenson, who is the founder of Onza Gems and also one of the collaborators on the Moyo Gems project. So I'm going to just launch the conversation today by asking you guys to talk about, is there such a thing as a defined ethical gemstone? Dive in.
Well, no. I think the jewelry industry is at a very interesting moment right now. Lots of really cool things are coming online. Lots of more choices for makers. And so actually, I think it's actually a good thing we don't have ethical defined yet, because right now it's allowing lots of different models to come up. I think eventually we need to put some parameters around that, so we don't contribute to greenwashing. What I like to think of responsible and ethical stones is um, you're choosing a few things of a status quo and working on those things. So it could be your like what Mina's doing in Nigeria. If you want some beautiful gems, you should check out her website. Um, you know, there's a lot going on, and she has direct relationships with a number of miners directly, and they work on different aspects of the mining site. For Moyo Gems, which I'm a part of, we focus on women miners and really focus on making their income dramatically better, between 3 and 10 times better, for example. So we're leaning into one thing or a few things, measuring it, and then reporting out. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be this fancy system. Choose one or two things, talk about it, and communicate, or else we're assuming that you're not doing anything.
I would say that our friend, I think most people in the room probably know Eric Braunwart and of Columbia Gem House, and he has this saying that there are no ethical gemstones, there are ethical people, and that really resonates with me. And I think at the heart, I struggle with the word ethical a little bit. Like I usually use the word responsible. I take the steps that I can, and I try to back up every claim that I make. And for me, that is my definition of kind of responsibility. And at the heart of it, we've actually had to talk about this in detail at Ethical Metalsmiths. I've been the president of the board for the last 3 years, and we actually spoke to an ethicist who gave us some guidance on, we're like, if ethical is in our name, and if most of us are trying to aspire to be ethical, and I do think it's an aspiration, not a destination, what does that look like? And his definition was, at the heart of ethics is love, and it's how you treat other people. And so I think for our business, what I've done is, rather than accept status quo, it's look at every step and every part of my business and actually rethink just because things are being done a certain way doesn't mean that it's actually the right way, or the right way for us. And I'm not proposing judgment on anything. Hi, Katie. I'm not proposing judgment on any way that anyone else is doing their business, but we are just kind of looking at it through the lens of humans and what might be best for particularly people who have been sort of left out of the traditional supply chain.
Yeah, if I can add something to that. Thank you, Monica and Christina. Um, so again, Eric, the quotes from Eric to me is just, I've been trying to find a definition for what makes ethical, right? And for me, I think that's the closest to it. I don't think we have ethical gemstones. I think we have ethical people. And for me, what that means is, as Christina mentioned, we're working directly with the miners. Um, some of these miners that we work with now, they're like, honestly, I've known them for so long. They're almost like family. Um, we, the relationship we have with them is really not just business. And everything came from, the just the heart to help people and to make things better. And I don't think they've seen too much of that. And so they are very endeared to us because they know that we kind of have their back. I don't know how to explain that, but that's I if anybody should ask me why you thriving in this sector, in this space, like, as a woman and all that, I think that will be my answer, is that is the people we work with, they just feel like, oh, they haven't been treated this way before. They haven't, experienced this sort of relationship with their buyers. And I think it's really, love, right, at the heart of ethical, and is the people really. Yeah, so that's what I'll add to that.
I love that, and I think everyone spoke so beautifully about it, and I'm in complete agreement. I think ethical comes with a lot of judgments, and I think that's what makes it difficult. Um, I think that transparency is something we'll all be talking a lot about on this phone call. But I think transparency and being ethical or responsible doesn't just mean we can see down into you, we can see what you're doing. Transparency should be both ways. In the way, Mina, that you're talking about, knowing the miners, they know you too, and that builds trust. We talk about, just care and trust, transparency, knowledge, all of that, I think, is what makes a more responsible supply chain. And honesty along, from the beginning, whether we're talking about pricing or knowledge sharing, I think all of that needs to go back and forth. And the closer our supply chain is, the closer we are to knowing the miners and working with them, the more we can have that. And another thing, I think, one of the reasons why I like responsible better than ethical is because you can't, I think if you say, well, this stone was made this and that way, and this is why it's ethical, and you have nothing to do with it except for a piece of paper that says it's ethical, people can do better than that. And I think they can be responsible for their stones. And if you can see where your stone comes from, and you can see something that maybe you think isn't good enough for your standards, you could be responsible and help there. Say, safety equipment is needed, which I know all of us probably know some mines that could use some safety equipment, right? So if you're buying a stone and you want to make sure everyone has safety equipment, maybe you can ask, maybe you can donate something, along with that stone. Or, Virtue Gem, we do a premium, it can be a top up, which I think a lot of models have that now when we're talking about our little niche of ethical, responsible gemstones that we're all talking about today. So I think you can be responsible in buying a gem, and I hope that everyone takes that next step and kind of works towards that. And we need transparency to get there.
I think just underscoring what Susan just said, we can buy from miners and know their name and follow what's going on with the village. And I think most existing gemstone traders will know the miners. It's going a step beyond that. It's going a step beyond the status quo and not just buying from them, but then also working on one aspect that needs to be improved, whether it's safety, whether it is, healthcare, even understanding like who's responsible for that, what happens. Whether it is making sure they're making more money, because when I first walked into the community that we work with a lot in Tanzania, that has transformed, the miners were skipping meals. They, they're here. They are mining these beautiful gemstones, and they were, in some cases, hungry. Um, we've changed that. Again, we've increased their incomes between 3 and 10 times what they're making before. That is leaning into an issue. And this whole community is really transforming through the Moyo Gems program. But so it's not just buying at slavery wages. That is being very intentional about paying more and about really honoring the miner and taking, and we take photos because it's joyful. And the miners, we get the photos back to the miners so they have photos of themselves. So it's engaging with respect, and then also again doing more, as Susan said.
I think that paying more piece, though, is a struggle for a lot of people because there's only two ways to do that. One is to take less at the top of at our end of the supply chain, and it all sounds good until it's time to take less. So we have to really think about the distribution of the money in the supply chain. And another way to do it is to market differently and trust that there are consumers out there who will pay more.
We just had that kind of issue come up just in a DM Instagram exchange where a designer was looking at gems that we had posted and interested in purchasing. And she asked the question, she's like, your gems are beautiful and I understand the history and the provenance, but they are more expensive than what I have actually purchased from other and she deals with kind of smaller, kind of more calibrated gems that are typically cut overseas and under different circumstances. And we, up to this point, have mostly used U.S. labor, which is a very different proposition for our Moyo gems that Anza Gems represents. And she was asking an honest question: How do I address this? And we gave her the verbiage that she needs in order to be able to kind of tell that story down her supply path now to her customers, so that we understand that. And this goes back to a quote of Martin at the Chicago Responsible Jewelry Conference last year, that maybe these responsible and fair mind and Moyo and Virtue and Nina gems are not more expensive. Maybe that's the true value and everything else is discounted. So I think the idea that we can actually tell you where this comes from and all of the steps that we have taken to bring it to market responsibly, respecting all of the humans in the supply chain. Yes, we are redistributing wealth, but that doesn't mean that the end person is necessarily getting substantially less when they sell that to a customer. If you're telling the story, and we try to enable you to tell that story accurately, but also eloquently, I think that you can also extract what it's worth in the marketplace. So it really does depend on very strong, very good support, supporting your claims and being able to actually represent that, not just in words, but also in kind of data and showing your processes, giving a peek behind the curtain, so to speak, to show people what the work is to actually do it in this way.
I mean, you guys are trying to sell these ethical gemstones at the tail end of an entire era of chasing costs in the wrong direction. This era of labor arbitrage that we've been in, where Europe and America and a handful of other places offloaded all of our production to very low cost wage countries, gave us false costs for our goods. And now we have to so it makes it very difficult for you guys to do these responsible projects because we just ran in the wrong direction for 20 years. So I like people to think about that when they start thinking about the true costs of things, because it's easier for me to tell that story because I'm not trying to sell someone a gemstone. When you're trying to sell someone a gemstone, there's all of that other baggage that's attached. So
yeah, and watch this space. There's new product coming online. Susan has been working on Virtue, and cutting at the source, which is there's existing talent that she's tapping into. Moyo is doing calibrated stones this year. Watch that space. Cut in country, where people are paid a living wage, and we just got back from the field. My colleagues, my colleagues are back in the field to measure what is a living wage in our source communities, and then what is it where we want to cut. We want to cut in the capital city where there's better electricity and things like that. And so how do we structure that before export to make sure the cutters are not only surviving, but thriving? And so it's a really exciting time in the sector. Like, 5 years ago, we weren't talking about this. And now we are. And I think there's an abundance of choice right now. It's not some, a few hundred stones a year. It is thousands of stones per year. And let's all lean into it. And each manufacturer or maker on the line, there's an opportunity for you to lean into this too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Nina, you said something earlier when you were talking about, is there a definition for this? You talked about having people's backs. And you guys have referred to this a bit, but I'd like to dive into that a bit more, particularly because there are, as Christina said, so many gem dealers that are just more part of the traditional gem distribution world in the US or Europe, and they do know the miners and the miners' families. And so they say, I know the source, but let's talk about in more detail ways that people can have people's backs and how to build those collaborations, because there's room for a lot more of this activity to be done.
So, can I go ahead?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll give examples based off of what we've done and what we are doing. Some of the things will be, I don't want to say going out of our way, because I believe that we're all working towards a goal here, and is to achieve some form of equity in the sector. So we do a lot of work with the government as well. We try to see ways that we can make things easier for the artisanal miners, and to, where the policies are not really working, we revise them. Where they are none, we try to recommend. We also work with the miners that we work with, we organize them. So we, put them in groups, and kind of formalize them. We do all this out of pocket, and in some cases, we've actually paid for their licenses. And so there's a whole list of things, like when it comes to the personal aspect, we pay school fees, we do things that not everybody thinks about, or not everybody does for them. So it's just things that are not necessarily in line with maybe your buying and, strictly business type of setting. It's more than that for us. It's more, we carry them along, and we want to see an industry where everybody's thriving. And for that to happen, these things need to be done. We need to, because these policies really, they're the things that kind of are at the foundation of, even, I know, I don't know if I should mention this, because I don't want to take the conversation to a different direction, but there's the whole argument about who is an illegal miner and who is not, and all of that. So there's there's a lot of work still to be done in just, finding that right path that works for everybody, and most importantly, really and truly taking these people along. So yeah, these are some examples. If I think about more, I'm sure it's just, like we mentioned in the start of this, when you have something as strong as love as your driving force in what you're doing, you tend to just really do things that, make people's lives better somehow. So yeah, that's what I'll say.
Let's unpack that a bit and dig into one of these at a time. Let's talk for a moment about formalization, how it's challenging from country to country, why it matters, you know, where you might walk away from worrying about formalization. But help people understand this concept of formalization, because I think it's outside the US and Europe, it's harder to wrap your head around.
So from what I talked about, formalization for us is when we're able to legalize the 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 land and the process. So the sometimes it's the family that owns the land, but they don't have a license to mine on their own land. So getting that license, having them trained, in some cases we actually train them on just, first of all, soft skills, and then also what they need to know regarding mining. Some of them don't have a clue. Many of these people are in the agricultural sector, they're farmers, and they stumble on, mining. So they don't really know much about the mining sector. So we actually have to kind of sensitize them, and we provide some kind of admin support for them. So we kind of help them form cooperatives for themselves, where they're a group of maybe 5, 10, 20 of them, and they're registered at the Ministry of Mines. So these are all the things that we do to formalize. I think the outcome of the formalization process is that if we take gemstones from this particular miner, we've done so in a process that is good for everybody involved, including the country. I'm just trying to find the words to use to explain what I'm saying. So you're giving back to the people, all the people in the process, and then the country is also getting what is rightfully theirs as well. So you don't have any issues when you sell such gemstones in the market.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think I think a lot of people are not aware that the law can be used as a weapon. And it's really easy to put the bar so high to be a legal miner, and then everyone else gets labeled illegal. But is that bar actually impossible to reach? Literally, like there might not be. Oftentimes, they're not a place to even receive paperwork for that license anywhere close to them. I remember I was in Liberia. It was 11 hours to the capital city, and they expected miners to go all that way, wait weeks for a license, and then you had to pay a bribe to actually get it, or an expediting fee. What's it called? An informal expediting fee. But so why would you expect anyone to become legal when there are no benefits? It takes so much time and extra money for what benefit? So I think sometimes people don't always appreciate that just because someone is not fully legal, that it's actually usually okay. And there's actually really good reasons why. Now, there's a difference between that and a criminal minor. Criminal miners are doing bad things and really have no intention for under any circumstances to become legal. Most miners are just villagers trying to make a living. And I think we should think about it that way. And with the right incentives, hand in hand with the government, they will become legal if it actually makes business sense. But right now, it doesn't make business sense, and there's really actually no incentives and no enforcement. So I don't like to kind of focus on the legal part. That being said, Tanzania, where we're operating, and Kenya have very clear legal frameworks and accessible legal frameworks. Hallelujah. So they've been willing to work with us on this. And so we brought a lot of women miners, which about 1/3 of all miners worldwide are women. We brought them into the legal fold and incentivized licensed mining. In those areas, it is accessible to them. So, and we made it more accessible. So hopefully that helps.
Beyond licensing, there are some things that I know you've all had to work with to help with formalization, because formalization is also about reaching markets. Do they have the bank accounts? Do they have the ability to receive funds? Where and from how? So talk about some of that work too, because that's part of the work of formalization that I think a lot of times people don't think about.
I think in Virtue Gem for the first 2 years we began because of COVID and out of COVID, and we had a grant from World Bank, and that was really helpful for us. But we really learned that it wasn't. We thought, oh my gosh, we'll open the markets and be the Amazon for ASM, artisanal small scale miners for gemstones all over the world. But we did about 2 years of business infrastructure building in the gemstone trade. And it goes back to when you mentioned, Andrea, when the gemstone market and how everything was being outsourced. Well, the gemstone trade really, the infrastructure isn't in the source countries. I mean, Mina, you having your amazing workshop and processing the full extent of the parcels that you have is amazing. That's a huge, beautiful anomaly. We need more of those. But that's really what we started to understand was the whole business infrastructure. In talking to women miners or gemstones or wherever, there's so many opportunities there. If you're into gemstones, cutting, fantastic, but there's admin work to be done. There's Excel sheets, there's the business of business. And with all of our direct supply chains that we're talking about, we're taking over what used to be sent to India for cutting or, to Singapore. We're getting those infrastructures in the source countries. And so that's, it's a lot of work, but the returns are the higher margins. And the returns are that all that benefit is going back to the source country. And the opportunities go so much further beyond just here's a parcel of rough gems. Pay me what you can because, I need the money now. Everyone can do so much better than that. And so I think that's really the future.
And also, if they don't have access to markets, who ends up controlling the flow of the gemstones from the mines? Let's talk about that for a moment.
Yeah. So in Tanzania, we, on average, there's usually between 5 and 7 local brokers that are between the miner and the exporter. And as Susan has pointed out in previous kind of webinars and things, every time it touches a pair of hands, every time that stone touches a pair of hands, the price doubles. And so you have all these folks, some of which might be adding value by pre-financing the mine. Others are just carrying it to another source. And so there are legitimate roles that brokers play. I do not want to be anti-broker. We incorporate local brokers into the Moyo program, for example, because they help us sort. They buy between when we're not there, they buy. That kind of thing. So we love the brokers that add value, but we have noticed that the whole supply chain is stacked against miners. The miners are the ones who are working in those tunnels who can barely breathe. They're the ones who are working in the hot sun and being exposed to the dust. And why are they at the very bottom of this? This, I don't know if food chain's the right word, but hopefully you know what I mean. This supply chain, thank you. So what we're trying to do is just really even that out and really honor the miner, because that's the hardest part. Physically, that's the hardest part of the supply chain. So that's what we're seeing in Tanzania.
And I would add to that at the World Bank conference where Susan Wheeler and Virtue Gem was a speaker and presenter, and also Cristina Villegas, it came up over and over. There were a lot of miners in the room. There were a lot of artisanal miners represented at that conference, and over and over and over again, access to markets. I mean, there's access to everything is an issue, right? We've talked about the conditions. There's no infrastructure in general in these countries, right? There's no water, there's no electricity, there's no banking. So, and then you are talking about artisanal miners even more on the periphery in these areas. So the idea that, you know, you can just take your gems to Tonga, Tanzania even might be a 6-hour bus ride under the best of circumstances for these women who are caregivers down the chain, down their family and up too, right? They're in the middle, they're of working age. Some of them are quite old. We've met women in their 60s who are still mining, but most of them are kind of in the middle, and they have children and they have elders that they are responsible for. So access to the market it can't be overstated. It is absolutely, you might as well be asking that woman with a parcel of gems that she just found and she has to feed her family. It's like going to Mars for her to get to Tonga, even to actually kind of have like an opportunity to see what her fair market value is. So the idea of shortening this chain and bringing the market to them, even if you involve the brokers, which I think is a responsible way to do that, I think access it's a huge part of why most of us in this room are doing what we do.
So let's go back to some of the information Mina shared before, just continuing to unpack that, talking about paying education fees. And this whole idea of families working together at a mine. These women are caretakers, their children are with them. Maybe they'd like them to be in school, but so let's talk about how we can help miners um, create new opportunities for those children who are otherwise going to be at the mine with them, because where else, they're not going to leave them home. So can you guys break that one down a bit?
Yeah, it's I think there's kind of two parts to that conversation. One key intervention that we're doing in our footprint, and I guess I'm speaking very NGO-y. I'm sorry about that.
You are, Joey. It's why we appreciate your perspective.
Yeah, so I work for PACT as a big nonprofit, and so I speak of footprints, and yeah, a lot of this kind of yeah, I can be kind of insider baseball sometimes. But one thing we're thinking about, okay, is not a lot will change within the conditions and socially until people can meet their basic needs. And they're barely doing that right now. When we walk into villages. So until they're doing more than just surviving, we can't really ask them to do anything else, right? But luckily, what we've been seeing is because their income is increasing so dramatically, we've been pairing that with what's called village savings and loan programs, which are kind of community banking. We all save $5 a week, if that's actually a lot for miners in Tanzania. And then Andrea here might want to start a business, and so but it's all our money being pooled. So we have a direct stake into her business. Oh, Andrea, have you thought about for your coffee shop having a stage and charging for that stage? Or muffins might be a big, I'm using the U.S. context, of course, but the point being we all have a stake in it. And so you have these businesses starting to be created. Some people might shift from mining into those other businesses. That's not our goal. Mining is a legit profession. But women are often choosing that to shift or to have enough side income to then make other things possible. Luckily, we do not have a lot of children on the sites. We do see it from time to time, and we are engaging, just saying, look, it's we know there's a lot going on at home, but this is a dangerous area for the baby. But the bottom line to your question is, when people have more income, we can ask them to do other things, and they can start affording babysitting and start affording a daycare. And before that happens, we can't really ask that. So I just want to point that out.
Can I add to that? So the people that we support or that we've supported in the past and are supporting with education, there are also different levels of miners. So there's miners who are miners/laborers. Many times we find them in the fields. They don't necessarily own the land. They don't necessarily have any stake, but you find them around the mining areas. They mine. Is some of them, the government might term them as illegal miners, or but there's other miners that maybe their family is a bit well off compared to the laborers. They own the land, but they don't have the resources to mine on the land, or they don't have the knowledge about things. So I'm just trying to paint a picture, because there's when we talk about artisanal miners, there are different levels of, it's not just one type of person or one person. So I think, just to add to what Christina said, that's also a huge thing, because the laborer that is also an artisanal miner, he has a child, he's going to bring his child to work, and if you offer to pay the child's fees, he'll take the money, but it won't go towards fees. It'll go to food, it'll go to things that they need right now. So I just wanted to make that comment.
We have I've seen that and I hear that, and that's a really interesting point that needs to be brought up. In the Responsible Jewelry Transformative, we have right now a pilot mining camp, which is being built in the mining area of Voy. And it's just, we're putting down a shipping container, and it's for the women of two CBOs, two mining cooperatives are coming together. And in the container is going to be a place to stay, a safe place to stay. And under the UN Safe Places for Women, we're putting together everything that this space can be based on what the women are asking for. And immediately it was assumed that this would be a place where they could bring kids as a safe place. And we're like, okay, this is going to take some work to structure this, because we don't want to encourage kids that mine. But when we have a meeting, which we're waiting to do in person this summer, when I get over to Kenya again and to get to Voy with the women, maybe they are going to come up with some structure where one of the moms, the aunts, or a woman is not mining that day and stays with some of the kids. I don't know what they're going to come up with, but it was immediately assumed that this would be a safe place to bring the kids while the women mine. Obviously, there's a need for that. So that's why we're all talking about it right now in different ways. So I'm really interested in hearing what the women come up with, and if we can find a way to make that possible for them. Because they go there and it's not being out in the mines, and whether they're staying in a tent or wherever they have to stay, it's not a place that is wonderful and welcoming and safe all the time. So
there are snakes. There are snakes and scorpions. I have seen myself in these mine sites. Like they have metal bed frames so that the snakes can't climb the metal bed frames. So
and that's why women want boots when they ask for mining equipment. It's because of the snakes.
And this brings up a point of having dialogue. We can't just assume from our comfortable positions here. Mina's in Nigeria right now, and she's having conversations. Susan has talked about going back to Kenya. Moyo started with a conversation, a dialogue with the actual women in the program, and asking them, not assuming what they want or what they need, but actually asking them and engaging in a dialogue. I think that idea of respect for the miners, and the idea of, we can't assume what they need, and in improving their livelihood should be at the base goal, so that all these other things can actually be layered on.
Well, and
I think it's just a really cool time. Again, people on the call, you start thinking about who you're working with, and because responsibility is not defined, ethical is not defined. There can be a million ways to get to what we can all kind of commonly envision, which are thriving source communities, manufacturing communities, and of course, where it's sold. And where it's sold in those host communities might be the same place. To be clear, I've seen how Nigerian women dress, by the way. So there's a huge fashion scene there. So I had that in mind. But Yeah, I think, we shouldn't be too prescriptive, but we should also be really clear about what we expect, and we expect people to be, to not just say I'm responsible, to say how, and not just talk about respect. It's like say how you actually are practicing that, by going beyond the purchase. So I want to make sure that we're guarding against greenwashing, but also giving the sector the flexibility it needs to be so creative about how we do things. And then we can compare, and I think part of the strategy there should be having a dialogue, um, and with multiple people in your supply chains about how things could get done.
Mm, yeah. Can I mention something about sourcing the gemstones themselves? I find that many, and this is also not to say one thing is right and the other is wrong. I think it's just the way people, it's business. At the end of the day, someone wants to make a profit. So I don't put anybody down for this. But I find that one of the other reasons why we have, this, relationship where we actually have minds where, when they find gemstones, they have to let Mina know first before they let other people know. They feel like they need to do that. Just they are loyal for these reasons. And one of the things is, during the peak of COVID, I found that nothing was really happening at the mining sites. Places were locked. There was a whole lockdown everywhere. People weren't making money, and these people were suffering. And I mean, like, really, really suffering. And some people reached out to me. We were able to support a number of people, but what kept coming up, and it's been happening since before COVID, but I think I really saw it then, is that these people have tons of gemstones. I mean, like, just sitting, like tons and tons of gemstones just sitting, and they're not able to do anything with it because people are looking for a particular type of quality or color or this or that. And I think within the sector, I think is something that we should start talking more about, because what this does is you take the valuable stones out, and then these people are, because people mine for weeks, and they find two valuable stones. The rest of the stones they're mining, they might mine a ton, and out of the entire ton, they just have 10 grams of like really high quality stones. So the bulk of their work is not being purchased or is not being off taken, and it's such a big issue for them. So we found a way, and I was saying just before we started the webinar, we kind of like buy some of the stones that are not so appealing, to people, but we transform them. I can show you, like, so these are aquamarine beads. The mine run for these beads had like high quality stones, medium grade stones, and then cabochon grade. The ones that we weren't able to like facet or sell, we convert them to beads, and we find a way to get them out. So I know, like, of course, this is unique because we are vertically integrated. Not everybody runs that sort of operation, but I think it's just maybe to encourage people a bit more to kind of, I don't know, I don't really know. Like, like I said, for many people, it's also a business decision. So I think it's something that we can continue to have a conversation about.
There's room for this. Susan knows and Monica knows. I have sent people over to them because in the jewelry industry applies this judgment. And Monica was the one who called it out first about what's a precious stone and what's a semi-precious stone. And Monica said years ago, can we eliminate this phrase semi-precious? It's all precious. We also apply a jewelry industry or fine jewelry perspective to say only some stones are worth buying. And yet consumers love gemstones. They love gemstone beads. They love stretchy bracelets. There is a place for all of this run of the mine product that could be sold. The problem is the supply chain doesn't care to move it to the market because they don't make as much money on it. And that is an area where we can make a big difference as a jewelry industry, finding ways to get these lower value stones into the hands of producers because people could be making money on it. But it's some work for lower value
Yeah,
goods.
And this is the perfect opportunity for in-country value addition, because some of those gems, I've been talking to someone recently where in East Africa, where they need this material, and there could be this opportunity where it actually never leaves East Africa, and it's going to be sold, worldwide. But my stretch goal would be that actually East Africans are also buying those materials as well.
Yeah.
So
The diamond industry forced this issue forever. You buy a parcel of diamonds. That means you get a couple of good things and a couple of not so good things. So the diamond industry knows how to do this, and knew it had to be done. We just need to find a way to do it in color gems as well.
And then Todd Reed came along, and then you opened up the rough diamonds, the colored diamonds, the opaque diamonds. So, I mean, there was a lot of pushback against that.
He actually bought the entire vault of a collector who had decades of black diamonds and didn't know what to do with them.
Yeah.
They were just sitting on it. So he turned it into a line.
I agree. I mean, we're always working towards that market too in Virtue Gem, and it's, some of it can be transparency as well. I mean, it's all a lot of work for us to be working and selling in different cuts. And Eric Bronward also, I think, was a pioneer in seeing different uses of, medium grade cabochons and doing interesting cuts that designers can purchase in that price point. And again, designers, the individuals, the yous out there are the ones that can really bring this forward and make beautiful jewelry out of it, because the big houses can't. So it goes, from one entrepreneur to another. And in not only creating the markets, but also like sharing, there is a market for that. There was something that was in Kenya, and there was a remote area where we were doing some gemstone training there. And I saw back some pictures of just some really bright rough. And I'm like, what is that? What is that? And they're, oh, it's nothing, Susan. It's just like pebbles. I'm like, oh, no. I want to see it. I made it, like, let's cab that and see what it looks. And it's just like incredibly cool, hot pink sapphire with these little, white sparkles in it. I mean, I don't know what the color's just kind of fun. And so, but there's a market for that, and they had that, and they didn't have to buy machinery or pay fuel to dig to the bottom of this and try and find, high grade. They can do something with what they have. And so it's, again, the transparency, the communication.
Yeah, drilling and polishing is, the easiest place to start. And consumers do not bring this insider view judgment to gemstones. Consumers love gemstones. They'll buy them if they're plastic. So they'll buy them if they're glass. So why not buy the real stuff?
especially when you can say this came from at least country of origin, if not down to the region, if not down to the miners, suddenly that becomes a much more compelling story. Even why would you buy Madewell jewelry, as a brand, and contribute to waste? Eventually that jewelry is going to wear out and go in a landfill. This is actually something that has lasting value.
That's one thing I wanted to bring up was country of origin. Monica knows I'll go into this topic. You don't know if you're buying the good stuff. Like, you don't know if you're buying conflicted stones or benign stones, or even like development, like positive climate restorative gems even, unless you know the country of origin. And also country of origin will tell you the risks that you might be buying into. And so my big call to the jewelry industry, especially colored gemstones, is at the bare minimum, you need to know what country it's coming from, because Afghanistan will have completely different risks than Colombia. Will have different risks than Tanzania. Will have different risks than Zambia and Nigeria. And so you can't possibly make a responsibility claim unless you know that. Because you could be supporting really dodgy people in those countries, and people who are not acting with love. And so my suggestion is that folks engage their supply chain, your existing supply chain right now, and lean into something. If people are not willing to lean in with you, you should change. And I say, lean in with your existing supply chain, because it's really disruptive and expensive to change, right? We all know that. And it gives, and by asking your existing supply chain to change and lean in on something, what gets that those million creative solutions, right? Um, you can also buy the good stuff, the existing good stuff from Mina, from from Virtue Gems, from Moyo Gems, from Anza Gems, and you can do both at the same time, right? And then you can also lean into other industry initiatives to work on some of these harder problems. But the country of origin, that is the bare minimum you need to even start speaking about responsibility. Because if you don't have that, you can't make any kind of claim whatsoever.
So Liz is asking a good question. What resources would you recommend to better understand the risks associated with different countries of origin? Because I mean, this is a hard thing for people to get enough information on. Where would you guys go?
I would begin as a bottom line would be what areas do we have sanctioned? So in our the U.S. government sometimes sanctions countries because of human rights abuses, and I think that there are that's kind of a baseline for me. But there are different areas of conflict. But I think when Christine is talking about leaning in, and she's at the level of PAC that does huge initiatives in so many countries where there may be conflict, is that there's you need to begin to be aware of where these things are happening. But there are different areas where NGOs have gone into conflict areas and worked on a safe supply chain, just to help those people on the ground that are experiencing terrible devastation from conflict. So I think that there's many different ways to look at it, and I think the more knowledge that you can have around, and I hate how much we have to say geopolitics in the jewelry industry, but what is happening in the world out there with geopolitics, because your purchases can be affecting the current scope of things in the world.
It's basically a privilege to be able to ignore geopolitics, so it's okay to have to explore geopolitics.
I think maybe I'd love to kind of hear Mina's take on this because, yeah, I mean, I know Nigeria is a beautiful country, but there's also a lot of news, right? And so, what would you like to hear people kind of go to, when if they know Nigeria is a country of origin? They're walking on rainbows there. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Like some of the most beautiful gemstones in the world are coming from Nigeria, and people don't know it. But go ahead, Nina.
Yeah, I mean, you've said it. We have really beautiful gems here, and I decided to be more vocal about gemstones coming out of Nigeria because I I'm a GIA certified GG, gemologist, and I've been to so many shows. I've seen rough stones from different countries, different African countries, different countries of the world, but I hardly saw people saying back then. Now is a bit better. But back then you hardly see anybody say this gemstone is from Nigeria or and I wondered why, because whenever I'm back here you see so many beautiful gemstones, and then also GIA is citing our sapphires, our tourmalines, our aquamarines. So I think people need to understand, like Suzanne mentioned, I think this is something that is very critical, that you might have reservations when you hear a certain country, but you have to understand that there are people who are actually genuine and like real in this same countries. And if you decide to shut down an entire country, you're going to basically disrupt people's lives that are innocent. Maybe they even are victims of these issues, and
Themselves.
then that's like a double problem for them. So I think it's just for people to ask questions and find the right people. They're actually genuine people, like I said, that you can source from, you can work with, and they'll be real with you. They'll disclose, they'll tell you exactly what's going on, where this is coming from, and what it's information, right? So I think I really would appreciate if people just converse more, to just find out, what, why, how, ask those questions.
Yeah, and knowing country of origin helps you ask those questions, right? It'll help you understand, okay, there might be conflict in a certain place. So you can start asking about that. And somebody might be perfectly fine and working in a non-conflicted place, or they might be working in a conflicted place, but have no part in the conflict and actually be victims of it. So it just gives you that set of questions to ask, but without knowing country of origin, you don't know what kind of questions to ask.
This goes back
Yeah.
to the point of in the chat as well. Someone said that their students are like, oh, mining is bad, therefore I'm only going to use lab stones, created stones, and you can't write off an entire industry, nor can you write off an entire country, even a region, without doing some due diligence, right? So let's do the work. Let's actually do some of that work that's necessary in order to get to something or somewhere that matches your values, and you get to decide what that is.
Yeah, I wanted to say to Karen earlier when she posted that very important question, tell the students, don't take the easy way out. Because which I've said to my own grown kids and grandkids, it's like, no, that's the easy way out. The hard work is the work. We've got a couple of minutes left. So what I'd like to do is just end with each of you sharing a thought on what it means to make a responsibility claim, and or the most important aspect of transparency to you, what you want people to think about in terms of transparency in our 3 remaining minutes.
Yeah, I think it's just like I said, I think more open and honest conversations, and get as much information as you can, because transparency is the picture is not necessarily exactly the same in different scenarios, or there's no one size fits all. So I think whoever you're dealing with, try as much as possible to get all the information that is needed. And as an actor in the sector, you have to disclose, and make sure whoever is buying from you knows exactly. You can't say, oh, I'm responsibly sourcing without having evidence for your processes.
I think my
That's actually
closing
a big
words.
goal for us. Oh,
Please.
sorry. That's a big goal for Anza this year, is to really be able to kind of not just articulate the claims, but actually document and be able to show that documentation. I think that you illustrate the best part of the transparency of our system if we can actually show that. And so that's a big goal for us this year, is just that increased transparency and making sure that we are documenting everything. I know that Susan, working with World Bank, and I know that you have a lot of lessons learned in that regard. We may not be independently audited, for instance, but I think that we can still show the same kind of information that you would if you were actually going through those audits, and just continuing the dialogue. We can't assume that what we thought was a good idea 3 years ago is still necessarily what's needed or important. And so that's the importance of kind of continuous improvement, and making sure, like, we can't just rest on what we thought was a responsible choice a couple of years ago. We actually need to kind of keep working on what now, if we've achieved maybe a little bit different level of financial security in this area, what's the next thing? What's the next step?
Yeah, and I'll just emphasize the progressive improvement part. If you wait till everything's perfect, you're gonna be waiting for a long, long time. So let's create like an ethical floor. That's what we try to do. A pact with Moyo, an ethical floor. That might sound weird, but like it's because you have to agree on what on that floor, and then you can progressively improve. So when do you start? But I guess just for people on the call, this is a huge opportunity, I think, to just differentiate yourself in terms of your product. If you're worried about showing mines, show people in their village, show people like in their non-mining outfits. That's what they most likely want you to take a photo of anyways. They don't want to be in their mining outfits. I wouldn't. And so I think, if we focus on people, that'll get us really far, and that'll help with marketing, so more good stuff, and help it make the sector really beautiful. So those are my words.
I think that, yes, transparency should be everywhere across the board, and we can do the best that we can with that. One of the things that really blew my mind was that many people who traded finished gemstones and from source countries didn't know how much their gem was worth in the marketplace. So just that transparency alone, all of us as jewelers, we know how much our jewelry sells for. We would never even think that that would be a mystery to us. So that's a part of transparency that I think has been really important and really has brought forward a lot of dialogue for us. And for responsibility, I like Christina's words, lean in, be the responsible actor and person in your own supply chain. Reach out to any of us, anyone that is engaged in their supply chain. And also, of course, I said earlier, reach out to your existing supply chain, because there's a lot of people who we want to turn and really have them be more transparent and more engaged as well, that are gem dealers and traders internationally. So thank you.
Everybody went, yes. Everybody got a last thought?
Yep.
All right. All of a sudden I was like, wait, did we miss anyone? Well, it is 1:02 well, Central Time, 1:02 p.m. So it is time for us to wrap up. I want to thank Nina and Susan and Monica and Christina for joining me for this conversation. As I thoroughly expected, it was a great conversation. And I think people can really take a lot from this and learn it. To Stuart Pool's question in the chat, this will be available as a replay. It will be on MJSA's YouTube channel. Look for it tomorrow, and then it'll be, go ahead and share it from there. And I want to thank MJSA for making this particular webinar, and last 2 weeks ago, the one on responsible gold, available to the broad public, as opposed to just the MJSA membership for free. However, we have really interesting conversations about the jewelry business every single month. If you want to get your hands on all of them, then I encourage you to join MJSA and support an organization that is trying to make a difference in the jewelry industry, and we need members to do that. So with that, I'm going to sign off and say thank you to everyone. Thank you to our wonderful guests and for all your great conversation. It was fun to watch, and hopefully I'll see all of you soon.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you so much.